All right. Give everyone a minute here. Well, before we get started, I just want to announce that tomorrow, me and Thomas are going to be doing a live stream that we've been doing for the past, I don't know how many Fridays by now, but you can expect that probably tomorrow. And we're going to be going over some topics. I just wanted to briefly mention that I was kind of curious to get his takes on some of his more recent stuff. More specifically, Day of the Dead. I was very surprised because I watched that, I think, around the end of last year. And what was the other one? He was mentioning, I think I lost it, but anyways, just a lot of I think some music related stuff too. So that was, I'm gonna save that though for tomorrow's stream. We're gonna get a lot more in depth about that. Today's stream is, as you can tell, a lot more casual. I just want to briefly share with you some stuff we got here, okay? For anybody interested in today's events. Yo, Danielle in chat, it's been a while. So we got a couple of things here. Some of the stuff might look familiar to you guys. All right. So without giving it away, I just want to give you a little sample there. Yeah, Danielle, we might have to bring you onto the show. You were part of one of the first test streams with me and Bryce. That's going back a little ways, but who knows? But for anybody tuning in, I got a few people. That's good enough. I was just curious what the turnout would be Saturday. I was gonna stream last night, but it got a little late, and I didn't know. I don't know if we have any European viewers. That would have been a nice morning stream for those guys, if they're out there. But I'm just trying to gauge what exactly we get for an afternoon American West Coast Saturday stream. Danielle's on board. Awesome. Very cool. Well, I wanted to talk about our good buddy Razer Fist because there is some overlap with a couple topics I wanted to go over. I saw that Academic Agent put out a tweet and he was responding to somebody about current events. And it was a much better take than some of his usual ramblings. What do we got? I'll eat the SpongeBob eyes on stream. Yeah. For those that don't know, some of the ancient lore, we're going to be getting into some Gen Z topics here, and maybe people in the audience can help me counter signal me if it's cringe, because some of this stuff may not have aged as well. Like the Hot Topic, Spencer's type stuff that we've sort of moved on from. But I accused Danielle of not eating the. For those that remember some of the ice cream from your childhood, maybe you remember this stuff. I'm gonna have to reach over here. Excuse me. Yeah, I don't know. To me, this is just a personal thing. I remember the ice cream truck would go to a specific spot in my school, my middle school specifically, and for those that don't remember, 11 p.m. here in England. Okay, so this is like a night stream, midday stream for America. European here, but it's way too late. Okay, so maybe I could have done you guys a favor last night. I missed when Hot Topic was metal. Hold that thought. 6 p.m. Yeah, of course, of course. Yeah, the American timelines I'm usually juggling. I'm not so well versed on the, Australia and so forth. Anyways, we're already off topic. So I just got to be honest. This just wasn't very appealing to me as a child. Um, and I don't know if it was just the eyes. I think the fact that it was yellow, that was what was polarizing. It's sort of like the yellow starburst. That just wasn't very compelling to me. And like today, I don't think I would eat this if I had the option to. And you see, like the eyes jump out. It doesn't even fit with the rest of the ice cream. So I don't know what people are talking about. Look at this, man. Look at this. These look like bowling balls. So, yeah, I don't know, man. Not a big fan. Gonna have to counter signal, even if it is part of the childhood lore. I don't know, man. See, like maybe this, but now the face looks a little weird. I don't know. What do you guys think? Am I overreacting? Oh, this is a classic. This is a classic. If you know, you know. Yeah, for those that don't know, I think the ice cream, I think your preferences with ice cream really gets into your psyche. It says a lot about you depending on what you picked. I like the ice cream sandwiches. I would buy those in the freezer. And a lot of these characters like Spider-Man, a lot of the what were the other ones, man? You guys got to help me out here. Gumballs, is that what they were? Because I don't remember. Definitely overreacting. All right, David. Excuse me. Never liked the colorful ice cream, more of a chocolate taste. That's my guy. That's my guy in the infantry. Yeah, he knows what's up. Yeah, the cookie dough, Rocky Road. This is the high IQ stuff, all right? This is the stuff that really shapes you at an early age. Very sus, that yellow. Yeah, true, Trouble Armstrong. But David is still going to eat it. All right, all right. Maybe I'm overreacting. You're probably right. But I don't know. Just wanted to go on a little tangent there to get us all settled in. So what should we start with? I want to talk about Razer Fist. I'm going to talk about, of course, you guys know the common themes here on the show. The 90s, Gen Z, generational differences. I want to talk about GTA too. That's going to come up probably in a few minutes here. And a lot of this stuff, also Gamergate, of course, one of our favorite topics. There's a lot of, that's a lot. That's a big roster. But there's a lot of overlap with Razer Fist because I'm curious to ask where you guys started your political journey, because I was not always tuning in to Academic Agent. That's actually a very recent phenomenon. And before that, I was more reading stuff that Thomas would recommend to me. And so us having that generational difference helped me sort of look into some stuff that I probably wouldn't find. And the average Zoomer is probably not well versed and doesn't have the investigation skills to find some of these more obscure texts. So I like the theme on the show with the generational differences, and a lot of this stuff, of course, is pop culture. We're not going to really delve into political philosophy. It's going to come up, I think, when we talk about GTA, because there's some political themes. I also I want to catch up with the chat here, and then I want to mention something that I just did yesterday. The reason that I was absent, one of the reasons I was absent yesterday was somebody that I just talked to that I can't wait to do more content with, the Prudentialist, who you guys are probably familiar with. Obviously, much more successful than me, much more well-read, well-versed. So I want this to be a prude shilling stream. I want to say plenty of good things about him because the guy is just a king. The guy is just, you know, a true believer. So, but real quick here, what do we got? I'm off all sugar and junk food for as long as I can hold out. That was me last year. I didn't have a lot of sweets. That wasn't really a. I mean, I guess it was a conscious decision. But yeah, I'm sort of in a similar camp. Good move, yeah. Infantry exclusively eating white chocolate. So I assume you're a big fan of the white Reese's. I got into it a little bit with a friend of mine that yesterday, telling me that the taste is different. The Reese's taste is not the same as the peanut butter cup, or I guess they're both peanut butter. Anyways, that's an important distinction there. I don't know. I don't think it's a big deal. Okay, it's not a big deal. What's the one that doesn't actually have a different taste? Is it Skittles? They're different colors, but it's actually there's no difference. It's not like Starburst where the yellow one is not very good, which I hope we can all agree. I don't want to get any pushback on that front. But I think it's Skittles. That's the one that doesn't have any actual difference. So it's sort of a psyop. Skittles is a CIA ploy to get you to think that it's the illusion of choice. It's really it really represents democracy when you're choosing Skittles in the grocery store next to all of the TMZ tabloid magazines in the in the grocery store. When you're at Vaughn's, if you're on the West Coast, if you're at what is it, Ralph's? I think that's an LA thing, but I don't know. I don't know where you guys are shopping at. Thomas 777 got me hooked on Kerry Bolton. Yeah, dude, Thomas always has the hookup. You guys are you're gonna turn this into a long stream. Oh, okay, that's the other thing. Simple but not so long name, one of the old heads in chat. Thank you for stopping by. I also wanted to thank, this is somewhat of a celebration stream too, not just for Prude, but for us reaching, and I couldn't have done it without Thomas, and this is not a one-man show, but I want to thank you guys for the 1,000 subscriber goal. And so now we are monetized. I don't know if that option appears in the chat. If you guys could help me out, is the super chat option there? Not, again, I'm not shilling. I'm just asking if that's there because I tried to set that up one night and I may have been a bit tired. So I don't know if I did it properly. I'm just curious if it works, I may have to consult somebody because this is very new for me. Again, a learning experience. So just type in chat if you guys can see that, the little $, I think it looks like. Ended up reading like 8 of his books. Let's go, David. As a Christian, what do you think about Inner Sandman? The Metallica song? I think it's a good song. There's some religious themes in there, so got him right here on the shelf. What do you got, David? I was rambling, so just got a handful of chocolate chips. Don't tell my mom. Yeah, I'll be sure to do that, Danielle. M&Ms. Yeah, I think M&Ms. That's another one. That's another psyop, another CIA. If you've ever read Who Paid the Piper, that's actually about M&Ms. A lot of people don't know that. Not a fan anymore here. Actually preferred white chocolate. Okay, I don't know if anyone's enjoying the stream so far. I promise we're getting into content. Just give me a second. I don't want to be scrolling and looking like a deer in the headlights. So I just want to catch up with you guys. Loved your article on Van Halen. Yo, Trouble Armstrong, thank you so much, man. I promoted that on Prude's Substack. I told him that I neglected writing on there. So I'm glad one person's reading it. I'm curious if you guys would be interested in more, because those were pretty fun. I remember I wrote one about Scruton, and it was cool to go back and read his stuff. All right, I think yo, $2 super sticker from, well, he sent money, so I want to get this right. Finamy. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing. So thank you, man. I appreciate it. Super stickers. Okay, so that was another thing. The super chat and the super sticker. I'm not too privy on that. Anyways, oh, you're talking about David. You're talking about 1984 music. Oh. 1984 as in the Orwell. Okay, sorry. My brain went to something else. Anyway. Simple. What I read on your website. I have the blog. It's still up, but I'm not active on it at all. There's a lot of good stuff there in the archive. If you guys are interested in that, that's loudsoundepicenter.com. And then the Substack, which is on the community tab on the YouTube channel. I think there's maybe 2 or 3 things that are on the blog that are also on the Substack, but most of that stuff is political. So I think you guys might be interested in that. What is it? Finami? Am I doing that right? All right. Super chat is indeed on. Thank you, Danielle. Super chat buttons there. Thank you, Steven. All right. We're gonna dive in. I don't want to bore you guys with just candy and Zoomer ice cream, if we could even call it that. So for me personally, somebody asked one of my first live streams without Thomas, somebody asked me my background. And for those that don't know, I actually did the show independently for a while, and it was a lot of fun. I have good memories setting up that stuff. If you guys ever go into the archive here, you'll see that there's some stuff here that is not really political, more music-based, just like the blog. And that's how I got my start. In high school, I remember being on the bus and writing Van Halen reviews on my phone in the Notes app. And I had a different phone at the time. And one of my starts was reviewing the David Lee Roth era of Van Halen. And so that's what inspired a lot of these videos. And I had the series where I went through the decades, 60s through the 90s. And then I sort of stopped because, for those that know, the 90s is kind of the beginning of the end for a lot of things. Fukuyama talks about this, of course. The end of the Cold War kind of removed a lot of American identity. And now that Americans aren't fixated on communism, it's sort of left this gap in the pop culture. And if you watch 90s movies, a lot of people lampoon that and sort of parody a lot of the American psyche at the time. And I'd be curious, since we have some European viewers, what the reaction was for British audiences, some of the, I guess really just outside of America, because me being an American Zoomer, I sort of have my blinders on for the outside world, as you guys know. You guys probably know better than me some of the short-sightedness on our part. And so my videos, that was a bit of a tangent, but my videos kind of ended in the 90s because I sort of hit a brick wall with the 2000s culture. And it's ironic because that's my culture. I should be an expert on that stuff, not the preceding decades. But it's kind of a weird thing, the fact that the 2000s doesn't really have a monoculture the way that the 80s did. In the 80s, even if you were a critic of the conservative media, a lot of it was very visual and you could understand it a lot easily. The Reagan Thatcher alliance made America and Britain easy to identify. You didn't have to read obscure books to understand American politics. Maybe understand some of the nuances, but it was a lot easier to talk about, even if it was coming from a left-wing source. I remember I had a professor who said, maybe you guys can expand upon this in the chat if you guys are interested, but he talked about how in the 80s you couldn't talk about Karl Marx because the pop culture was very anti-communist. And so he was talking about it from a victim mentality, the conservative media had a lot of weight. And I definitely agree on the religious front, the Christian front, which I support, even though it's, the Tipper Gore and the Washington Wives were, some would say that would be an opposing side to heavy metal. So to be sympathetic to them, some might call me a traitor in the metalhead circles. But, I think the religious aspect is a lot more important and it transcends this world. So if I had to bet on Dee Snider, Frank Zappa, and I think the other one was John Denver, I think I'm gonna bet on Tipper Gore on that front. And I remember bass guitarist and some others in the live chat that one stream. I'm not alone on that. That's not a contrarian take. I think there's a lot of substance there. But anyways, I was talking about my background and so my political journey was sort of rooted in a lot of the normie YouTubers, and I think we really latch on to some of the people that cover a lot of topics. And so that's kind of what I want this channel to be, not just a one-stop shop for political theory and philosophy. There's a lot of untapped topics, as somebody said, and I think one of our last streams, the pop culture angle is kind of neglected in these circles. A lot of people overdose on the philosophy stuff, talking about books, and I think it's a lot different than like Skeptical Waves, who is just, he's putting out the content. That's not the same as other channels that just kind of stick to the philosophy stuff and don't really graduate from it. So there's that distinction there. And because we have people like that are all over the map, I think something that me and Thomas and others can provide is the pop culture angle and sort of make sense of it, similar to what Tyler Hamilton does with horror movies. Maybe he's somebody we can have on the show, because I'm very interested in that angle. I'm not so sure. Like I said that one time, classical theist, I think, can speak to a lot of theology. And Tyler Hamilton was someone that I discovered last year, I think. So that theology perspective, I think, is interesting. I think a lot of people should maybe check that out. So for this show, having the pop culture angle, I'm sort of siphoning, or not really siphoning. I was inspired by Razer Fist, who was mostly, I was interested in his metal takes. And so he was like a music guy for me. But then, for those that remember, and I'm curious if people do, he was mainly a comic book, kind of a consumer. I think that's a fair label, given his room, given a lot of the stuff he surrounds himself with. I don't think that's purely an antagonizing thing to say. I mean, he sort of wears it on his sleeve, the shadow, stuff like that. He's really into that stuff. And so he was more of a comic book movie. I was really impressed with his noir series. That, to me, that showed that he was really interested in stuff outside of modernity, outside of just the standard Marvel stuff. So I saw that he was into metal, and he had a lot of editing. And so it was very crisp and clean. And so I thought, this is a guy who really knows what he's talking about. And then there was this big shift, probably after Trump, where he really went all in on the politics. And there was some overlap because there was a lot of normie takes. And I guess I can say this right now, but one of the limits to Razor Fist is he's very stuck. He's in lockstep with a lot of the mainstream politics, and that's sort of his own undoing. The fact that he is, for lack of a better word, he is a boomer. And even though he is sort of hip to a lot of the pop culture that maybe a boomer wouldn't be privy to, he is stuck in the Ron Paul revolution. And of course, I'll show you in a second here. He is an Ayn Rand fan. And for those that know, I got the book. I saw this in an antique shop and I was interested. It's, a lot of her, I think this is her unreleased, some of her unreleased work. And so, as you guys know, there's nothing wrong with, I don't think there's anything totally wrong with having a selective reading. And, we don't have to agree with everything that someone like Chomsky writes about, but maybe there's some overlap there. The fact that he talks about manufactured consent, he talks about the media and the anti-war stuff. I think a lot of that stuff is appealing and compelling to mainstream audiences. However, you're supposed to graduate. I mentioned on another show my libertarian friend who makes fun of me for being a paleocon. In fact, he even gave a presentation at our university. He said that paleocons actually aren't real because they are just Edmund Burke fans of the modern age. They are just, in other words, they identify what encompasses them as just anti-neocon. Now, of course, this guy has not read Mel Bradford. He probably hasn't read a lot of Buchanan. And so obviously there's a lot more depth than just being anti-neocon. And a friend of mine reminded me of the Strategy for the Right article that Murray Rothbard wrote. Rothbard's another good example of somebody who you can read and not, there's the libertarian stuff, the ANCAP stuff, obviously. Someone like me kind of rolls my eyes at people who are still stuck on that, even as adults. That's sort of the one aspect of Razor Fist, that he's in lockstep with a lot of the ANCAP, the sympathetic to Ron Paul in the wrong aspect, I think. So I wanted to get into more of that, but I'm curious, since I've been going on for a bit here, I want to tap into what you guys think. Yo, bass guitarist in chat. We love bass guitarist. The guy shreds, man. The guy should be he should be like a David Letterman musician, where he just does the intros to TV shows and so on. Anyways, the 90s was the end of the 80s. Well, yeah. Literally. It is. Tuesday, FA Tuesday. No, excuse me. Brotherhood of Nod. That's who said that, not Tuesday. Tuesday's here. Thank you. Yes, it is literally the end of the decade. It is a new decade. So I don't mean to bust your balls there, but I just, that's a funny comment. Also, the 90s don't begin until 92, I would say. So 90 is still the 80s. If you look at some of the popular albums, definitely still the 80s. Even in 91, 92, you had some of the glam metal, Dangerous Toys, Skid Row. They were still at their peak. So it is still the 80s when you're in the 90s on a technicality. Am I going to your birthday party, Danielle? I have not gotten an RSVP, so I don't know. That's sort of balls in your court on that one. The culture of Reaganomics was in the 80s. Yeah, and it sort of held the pop culture hostage. And that's what I think Razorfist too. To an extent, he's sort of playing a similar role to the gatekeepers of the right. He's not giving anybody leg room to explore other aspects of the right. And it's funny because he's that thanks to a friend of mine on Discord for reminding me, he has read Buchanan and he sees himself as a Buchananite. So I don't understand why he's wasting his time with Ayn Rand, Ron Paul, some of the worst aspects of paleo-libertarianism. I don't want to totally counter-signal Ron Paul, but people like Dave Smith, I think they really need to retire some of that stuff. I think it wins some mainstream people over, but you gotta delve into other stuff. And maybe that's sort of the thing where those people do need to maybe get a little autistic with the political philosophy and theory, because clearly a lot of that stuff is absent in their worldview. So some people get stuck on the philosophy because they get it and they kind of want to stay there. Some people don't read enough and then they lecture everybody else about being a bookworm. And it's like, you could really benefit from some of that stuff. Yes, thank you, Trouble Armstrong. A lot of the reason the 2000s were not a monoculture is because of the internet. You're right about that. And so a decentralized culture. And so now we have a buffet of music. The music streaming is another good example, having Bandcamp and Spotify, getting us out of the MTV monolith. That also gives rise to like weird subgenres that wouldn't have existed in the 80s. And so that's where you can get a lot of wiggle room for content creators, stuff like this channel. I'd like to learn from some of the other people in the academic agent sphere and just kind of tap into the pop culture angle where it may be lacking. Although academic agent does, the deepest lore. He's definitely an expert on a lot of the pop culture angle. There's that one video where he compares the 60s American counterculture to the 60s European counterpart. And so stuff like that, deserves episodes, as he does. He's doing it. And so I'd like to contribute to that as well. Yeah, Trouble Armstrong says, everything after 2000 feels the same, whereas those of us who were older recognize the markers of past decades. Yeah. And kind of a cringe example, but the Star Wars franchise is a good case study. It also is a case study for, democracy. When you open it up to the fans, how good are the Star Wars movies? Not very good by comparison. When you have a studio, a corporate entity pursuing its will, regardless of what the majority thinks, when you have that executive authority, you get a much more consistent brand, you get a much more consistent product. So maybe that is there's something to that, Yes, even if they had done like a consistent theme with the modern Star Wars sequels, it probably would have been better than if they just placated to what the audience was thinking. And again, this is the post-Gamergate effect. We're going to get into Gamergate in a minute here. But that's the problem with movies, is you're not supposed to really care about the audience in a way. Richard Crook says rock music was evolving up until the mid-90s. The 2000s has just been archaeology. Or not that word. But yeah, well, I think rock reached its peak. I don't know what else you could do with that genre. After, I think Robert Fripp said that from King Crimson, progressive rock reached its peak in the 70s. And so after that, it ceases to be progressive. And after you reach that ceiling, it's like it's recognizing the limits of music. we can make as many albums if we want as we want, but eventually we're going to run out of influences. And so what can you do beyond, like what people say about riffs sounding similar? Well, there's only so much room on the neck of the guitar, so of course there's going to be overlap. So some people may not want to accept that. They want to, whenever their favorite band releases another album, Iron Maiden's a good example. They are in lockstep with the Brave New World era of songwriting. And I don't think Ron Smallwood, I don't think his influence is in Iron Maiden's production anymore. I think it's been given over to Andy Sneap. And so I think Andy Sneap is probably sympathetic to Steve Harris's modern songwriting. It doesn't sound like the 80s. It's very progressive in the modern sense. And if you like that stuff, then it's a machine of good content, their past few albums. But for people who are kind of, they're kind of over that stuff, you see that it's run its course. And so there you can see one example of the limitations of music, people that are just in lockstep. And that's where I think Razer Fist is with his political videos. A lot of it is just 40-year-old talking points from Milton Friedman. Brotherhood of Nod says, adding some pop culture is so necessary for the right. It's all philosophy and niche. Niche and Nietzsche, that's the other obsession people have. That I got over pretty quickly, to be honest. And we need to be present in all aspects of life. Yeah, I think that's kind of what Tyler Hamilton talks about, why he stays on the horror movie subject. It's a window into the culture. So maybe that is necessary. Yes. Okay. Yeah, this is the guy right here. OAA 2288. This is the guy we were talking yesterday, or I guess technically this morning, because it got kind of late. But yeah, he summarized it perfectly. Razer Fist only took one red pill and stopped. That's exactly what happened. And a lot of people do that. A lot of people are in the mainstream circle. I think Michelle Malkin described it as, what was her term? I forget. She had an article talking about it. They're in the, Ann Coulter has that term, the uniparty, but it's something else. It's like the mainstream, the Fox News diet. A lot of people are stuck there. And there's just a lack of curiosity, I think. There does have to be some investigation on your part. And so the fact that you have to do some work is probably unattractive to most people. Record Deepness. That's a good username. There will never be enough Metal Mythos episodes. Well, that's the thing. And let me just do that right now since you brought it up. Sorry for the delay here. The thing about Razer Fist, also, I'm a little confused. Like, the Rageaholic and Razer Fist, people have speculated that he's inspired by the Alice Cooper album Raise Your Fist and Yell. Raise Your Fist, Razer Fist. That's pretty cool. But I don't understand the two names, and maybe I'm being a bit hypocritical with my nickname being Ace. But I don't know. He's literally using two nicknames. So I'm a little confused on that. And I think he originally was the Rageaholic. And again, I'm not too privy on his background. Maybe I need to pull up Know Your Meme for Razer Fist, not just Gamergate. But I think he originally was the Rageaholic and then evolved into Razer Fist, if that makes sense. So that was always confusing right off the bat. The fact that the types of labels that people choose for themselves says a lot about the person. So that was kind of a red flag as far as what some of his takes may be. For people that jump from YouTuber to YouTuber, you can recognize some patterns and some of the shortcomings with their content, whether it's physiognomy or if it's some other aspects. That was something that kind of jumped out right away. But his playlist, there's a lot of good stuff in here. This isn't just me bashing the guy being a contrarian. Yeah, film noir, no archives. I remember going in here and being like, yo, this guy. Oh, I thought there were more videos. There's 7. See, why don't you revive this franchise? Because it's a playlist, but it's 7 videos, and it's a lot of editing. So I'm not just telling him to just churn stuff out, but I mean, there's a lot of the 30s, 40s, 50s. There's a lot of content there. There's a lot of untapped content. Maybe that's what this show is gonna delve into. Maybe Thomas can help me out with that. But here's a playlist in his archive here that is kind of neglected. And so from a spectator's perspective, this is something that, you could find something. You could do neo-noir. I don't know if that's a term that he probably might be annoyed by that because it's a little pretentious. But I just noticed that there was kind of a wide range of topics, but a lot of them were contingent on politics. And where's that playlist? You'll notice a big gap in the content. 7 videos here. His Metal Mythos has been stagnant because he is more focused on his political ambitions. I don't even know where that's at. Anyways, you don't have to look very far because it seems like he's always giving his take. And, that whole something happens in the news and then you make a quick video. That's a little annoying because that's what everybody does. Not to be too much of a critic. But the way he does it is it's like a 5-minute video compared to somebody who can do an hour with guests. I think that's a lot more beneficial. But when you just give a 5-minute video talking about Arizona, I don't think people get a lot out of that. Oh, here it is. Yeah, look at the gap, Just for comparison, I know it's just one playlist, but you can see this with some other stuff here, like Metal Mythos. Film No Archives has 7 videos, and then the politics is constantly expanding, constantly getting updated. I would like that same attention given to the other stuff. So that would be my main critique of the Rageaholic. And then if he's going to spend so much time on politics, why not do some investigating, If I could give another example, John Doyle, which I know is a bit mainstream for this side of, for our, this sphere, but John Doyle was someone who also had a similar evolution. If you look at some of his earlier videos, it's a bit, I don't know, a bit dorky with the commentary, but more recently, a lot of his stuff is clearly inspired by Academic Agent. And so I don't know who is an influence on the show, but stuff like that is cool to see. You like to see the graduation. Somebody like Paul Joseph Watson, some of his content used to be more normie tier, and then he widened his horizons. And so that's something that Razer Fist could easily do. Could easily become a regular cast member in some of these more relevant YouTubers. So, they call it a libertarian pipeline for a reason. The libertarian is not the end point. That is just the gateway. So maybe Razer Fist could benefit from that. Matty G, another good summary. He's a boomer who can turn a great phrase. That is true. I cannot critique his writing capacity. There is a lot of, that's another thing that he's very well versed in. So again, I just looking from the sidelines, there's a lot of room for improvement. And maybe when you're the content creator, you don't pay attention to those sort of things. And maybe you look at your audience as sort of a monolith. But I think And I think because he gets so much views on those political videos, there's no incentive to explore those other areas. But again, it shouldn't be about that, right? There's a lot of content to be had there, you know. Kevin Kidd says I wouldn't go that for Razor. He just doesn't read any of the anti-enlightenment material. Well, that's the thing too, is he pivots to the Enlightenment, and he's very sympathetic to the classical liberal. He was friends with Sargon. He did that one Sargon stream, and so that's very telling too. The people he surrounds himself with. That's not really something that you want to hitch your ride on, you know. Like Academic Agent said in one of his videos, he graduated from reading French Marxists to Isaiah Berlin. And I think Razorfist can have a similar evolution if he allows himself to. So Isaiah Berlin's writing might also be appealing to him, you know, the two sides of liberty, since he's, you know, it's very like Hoppe, you know, it's a very, very contingent on, you know, rights. And so that's something that I think would be very appealing to him since he cares so much about Ayn Rand. Oh yes, Trouble Armstrong reminded me Ayn Rand's also a cold warrior, so that also leans into his anti-communist sensibilities. Tuesday, FA Tuesday. I'm sorry for what I said earlier. He says no libertarian should be making fun of anyone. Very true. I don't think Razorfist identifies as a libertarian though, and that's also kind of annoying. One of the reasons I was blocked is because I was basically calling him and his heroes. You know, Razorfist, I think Rand calls that hero worship, what you're doing. Maybe you should get beyond that. But anyways, he sort of surrounds himself with a lot of libertarian philosophy and then says, no, he throws his hands up and says, no, I'm a right-winger. So what's up with that, man? Very, very pretentious, I gotta say. Paleocons, all I see are dinocons. Yeah, as you can tell, I'm a dinosaur over here. Trouble Armstrong says Chomsky isn't relevant in a world where America is declining or relatively weaker. Well, that's the other thing about Razorfist. If we're going to look at him from a philosophical perspective, it's reached its expiration date. I'm not calling him a neocon, but it would be like being a neocon in the 21st century. A lot of that stuff has just reached. It's already peaked and it's sort of reached the Spenglerian cycle, so to speak. A lot of the stuff we talked about in that Prude Substack is sort of still in my mind, so forgive the analogies. But Chomsky, especially today, like he doesn't really hold his base accountable. Back in the 60s or 70s, he sort of built his following around pseudo-curious, you know, what Thomas said about Joe Rogan, or Joe Rogan as he calls him. That's kind of where Razorfist is. He's part of that same cast, that Glenn Greenwald, Chris Barnes, as OAA mentioned. He's part of this coalition that is not very curious. And so that's sort of the problem with Chomsky today is, yeah, there's aspects, just like Razorfist, a lot of what he's saying is true. And he'll even give stuff a fair hearing. But, you know, in the modern age, you gotta get into elite theory. You know, maybe Razorfist could benefit reading something like Burnham, maybe reading some more Francis or Paul Gottfried even. So that would be a lot more interesting. I think his content would get a lot more better. So I don't just want, you know, I don't want Razorfist to go out of business. I want Razorfist to come home. I want Razorfist on the cigar stream. That's what I want. It's not I don't want to throw him down and bring myself up. I want to bring both of us up. I want to, I want people to be in the kingdom of ends. You know what I mean? If we all sort of have a sort of autonomy in that regard, maybe we can all, we can all by mistake create a community. You know what I mean? Organically, a more grassroots coalition rather than this. Because what it is it's conservative Inc. and it's populist Inc., the camp that he's falling into. It's controlled opposition. I'm not saying he is, but it's a mainstream Twitter, like what Malcolm says, the Fox News diet that keeps everybody in lockstep with the elite. Yeah, and Chomsky doesn't criticize his base because he has no incentive to. That's what Razorfist does with his audience. He has no incentive to graduate. He can do the same thing every year and it wouldn't affect his brand. But as somebody who looks at a lot of content, I want everything to be as close to perfect as it can be. So, and I think Chomsky is also aware that the things that he talked about in his college lectures that didn't really translate with the college audience. You know what I mean? They sort of, if they're reading it all, they half read or they skimmed a lot of Chomsky's philosophy. Not his like Nicholas ANCAP sensibility. I'm talking about like they just latched on to the anti-right. They define themselves more as progressive rather than maybe some of the more nuanced hippie philosophers. Not philosophers, but people that didn't, I hate to use these terms, and this is the kind of stuff that Razorfist does that maybe he doesn't realize how boomer it is, but it's like the 60s hippies that aren't woke today. So people like Glenn Greenwald, the Oliver Stone, that's kind of where Chomsky is. But rather than looking at his base and looking for areas of improvement, he just sort of stays there and doesn't he doesn't want to have any more checks and balances. He just wants to continue the brand. He's already made it, and so he has no reason to self-critique. Razorfist needs to kiss more hamsters. So true, Danielle. Record deepness with some Rothbard content. I got to read that. OAA was getting me back into Rothbard, so I'll have to save that one for later. Brotherhood of Nod said Razor never struck me as a libertarian. Well, when he talks about rights, like I was even recently looking at his Twitter, and in the back of my mind, I'm like, please don't talk about Ayn Rand. Talk about, current events. Talk about, post a metal song that we haven't heard in a while. And invariably, you will run into an Ayn Rand quote, or you'll talk about how the Ayn Rand Institute is actually fulfilling her needs. And she would actually probably be happy with the Ayn Rand Institute since they haven't been controlled by the elite. And it's like the Ayn Rand Institute is a salvageable think tank. Like, how can you look at that with anything positive to say? Ben McKay says, libertarianism brings people like Jack Murphy into your movement. So true. That in itself should debunk a lot of libertarianism. The fact that that's the kind of company you're keeping, I mean, what is going on? Like I was saying with the Joe Rogan stuff, it's also part of that manosphere. That's what was so boring about the right before 2017 is a lot of the manosphere guys were pushing their brands, and it just felt very gimmicky. It felt very fake, and there's nothing. I don't think there's anything appealing or cool about that side of the right. I think we really need to graduate from that too, if there's anybody still there. That's another dead end that kind of goes with the people stuck in libertarianism. Richard Crook agrees the 80s didn't end until 1992. That is true. Lance Meyer says Winger. Yep, that's another one. Giant came out right at the end. Whoa, Bell Curve. That's pretty obscure. I knew someone who was big into that band. Yeah, that's more melodic. That's more like TNT. If anybody's a fan of that. Yo, me and Richard Crook thinking alike. Very cool. I am invited to the birthday. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for thinking of me. Mike Floyd, a paleocon. Very cool. Richard Crook, you've been watching, what is it, Metal Evolution? I forget which series interviewed all those people. The W bands, White Lion, Warren. Yeah, that's true. That's what D. Snyder called them. Yeah, the fact that D. Snyder had that phrase ready to go, that's another thing. It's like, oh, it's just part of that salesman mentality. But yeah, that is kind of true. The unplugged. We're sort of living in the unplugged era of dissident politics. You know, we used to be in the 80s, we used to have a lot of grit, a lot of masculinity. And now the post 90s effect, not just on politics, philosophy, and video games, which we'll get into, we're pandering to the unplugged audience. We're pandering to the soccer moms, and we're widening the base. We're in the Guns N' Roses Use Your Illusion era. You know, Axl's trying to sound like Queen, and it's like, no, Duff McKagan is there. I'm Duff McKagan, saying, nah, man, we got to go back to Appetite. We got to go back to our roots. I want to tell Razor Fist, you know, back in Lies, we would have said a lot of edgy stuff. But now in Chinese democracy, Razor Fist wants to talk about China and communism and the social credit system. So it is true. There's definitely a Guns N' Roses angle to this, to Razor Fist's political development. I mean, he is stuck on Chinese democracy. I like Scrapped. That's a good song. But listen, Razor Fist, the opening track, the title track, it's a good red pill. It's very heavy. It sounds like the classic stuff. It sounds like us. But then you get into If I Were or If I Was. I don't even remember the title. You know, Madagascar is cringe, man. That's not the politics that I associate with. You know, yeah, you're talking about the IRS, but there's more to it than that. It's not just about the Fed. There's other aspects of politics. There's other networks that you would be interested in. Yeah. So true. Yeah. You're hard school. Or whatever that recent song they put out. I want Shadow of Your Love, you know? Very relevant to the stream. The GNR lore that no one is interested in. Yeah, Mike Floyd said it best. Libertarians have no way to deal with collective leftism. That's true. They can't compete with it. That's the ironic thing about Chomsky is the mainstream doesn't really have a problem with manufacturing consent. They don't have a problem with his anti-war views. It's not like in the 70s where the president would put Chomsky on a blacklist, like the Hollywood blacklist. We don't have anything like the Hays Code, which Prude brought up, reminded me of last night. And what does that say? Chomsky is not a threat to the system. He is controlled opposition, basically. He's one of them. he overlaps with them. Like, Chomsky claims to be supporting decentralized independent media, but Chomsky's views are synonymous with the mainstreams. So you can't have that overlap, you know? You can't have that hyper individualistic Randian philosophy and call yourself a rebel. You're not. So Bass Guitarist says Paleocon is getting much warmer to him. I'd be happy with that as the governing ideology. Yeah, that's the thing. You know, Academic Agent talked about when he was getting into French Marxism, that framework of talking about ideology. He was citing someone specific, but when you have to concede that there has to be a state. There has to be something. You know, I was talking about Schmidt yesterday, but you know, the morality and sovereignty have to be linked in the same way that ideology is sort of keeping everybody on the assembly line. And so if you had to pick ideology, not that we should, like what me and Thomas talked about, debunking materialism and the cult of ideology, if you had to pick, I think Paleocon is a safe bet. So Vingel asks, another regular of the show, just what exactly is up? A lot of things. We haven't even, we're an hour in and we haven't even gotten to everything. Let me just, before we get any further, I want you guys to, I want you guys to be thinking in this mindset. If anybody's wondering what kind of content people should be thinking about moving forward, this is the kind of stuff that I'm curious. What are some other people you would like to see interviewed? You know, what's another storyline in Cunley's universe? I'd be curious what ideas you guys got in the back of your minds. I just wanted to have these tabs open just to keep your imagination flowing. I want you guys, what are some, you know, this is the most recent content, but I want you guys to be thinking in this mindset. And when you're in the chat, when you want to give takes in the chat, if you got any questions, I want you guys to be thinking like this. So that's why these tabs are open. So that's all I wanted to say about that. So, anyways, I'll go back. I'll give it back to you guys. Yo, Maddie G. That's a pretty good anecdote. Pretty good talking about your arc. Pretty cool. David says, I'd classify myself as a Christian conspiracy theorist more than anything political. Well, that's funny that you bring that up, David. I can't think of a better segue. We can do one of our topics right now. So, I wanted to talk about video games because, and we can kind of do two birds with one stone here. One of the things we talked about in the Prude stream. Oh, I haven't even talked about Prude yet. Should I do that now, or we'll get to that at the end? We'll get to that at the end. I want to thank Prude for allowing me to show up on his Substack. It was a huge favor. It was good times. You know, it's good to have some Zoomer solidarity, as I said on Twitter. So that was just, I just wanted to give him nothing but thanks from me. So one of the things that he reminded me, and I wrote it down here somewhere in my notes, which is, you know, the ramblings of a madman. He had a statement at the end where he said that Gamergate was the Hays Code for Zoomers, and it was the Hays Code for pop culture. in modernity as we know it. And that is such a brilliant statement. I can't believe, because I've kind of had this obsession with the Hays Code and classic Hollywood. And the fact that there was a time when the pop culture was conservative, Jack Warner was conservative, and the Republican, Frank Capra, another. So you had this, like in the 80s with Tipper Gore, you had this conservative mainstream culture that had checks and balances and was filtering out degeneracy, was filtering out, tapping into making sure the pop culture didn't reach where it did in the 90s. It didn't reach to the depths of Woodstock 99, for example. It didn't reach Jerry Springer or Attitude Era of WWE. And Gamergate really got us where we are today. It changed the way we look at politics, the type of movies and video games we get. And so I wanted to bring up Gamergate as a topic because I think when we talk about pop culture on the channel, this is really going to be a common theme. The fact that Gamergate and its influence has the pop culture hostage in a lot of ways that are a bit underreported now. Back then, there were a lot of people that were talking about this stuff. And I remember Angry Joe, of all people, was one of the main people to introduce this topic to me back before I was really political. And so when David talks about, less political and more kind of just investigating conspiracy theories, that's kind of how I got my start. And that's part of my background before Gamergate, was just checking stuff like that out. I just thought it was interesting. Paul Fahrenheit brought up in Fallout New Vegas how, as a Zoomer, the fact that you have Caesar's Legion and you have Mr. House, these dynamics were untampered with by the Gamergate era. And a lot of that stuff got a fair hearing. Whether you agree with it or not, it was just there. And the fact that you had the option to side with these factions, that encouraged a lot of curiosity for mainstream audiences. People were introduced to anti-democracy sentiment, rethinking political theory. And even some of the reactionary politics are relevant in Fallout New Vegas. The fact that the NRX guys were just a few years prior, maybe the Fallout developers were reading some of that stuff. I don't know if you guys think that that's far-fetched. I was going to get into Rockstar as the example of critics of American culture in a more mainstream filter. Some of their critiques are very boomer tier, but I think that it's still, it's worthy of a thought experiment to look at Rockstar as that was the way of critiquing philosophy and culture dynamics before Gamergate, because GTA 5 was 2013. And I think Gamergate was 2014. So you have a lot of stuff to look at there. What came before and after, what was the change, and Gamergate was that change. If anybody wants to underestimate that, just think about that year, 2014. Think about what came before and after and ask yourself, think about just all the different dynamics at play. So anyways, to really get into what David said, I think that Mike Torino, I'm surprised there's not more Anon accounts dedicated to Mike Torino. There's a lot of GTA characters you could dedicate to Anon accounts. People like Blepe, which I just found his alt, which I didn't even know was out there. We'll probably save that for another stream since we've gone so far. But Mike Torino really, he just sort of reminded me of a lot of the thinking that existed in the GTA universe that kind of overlaps with maybe some of our dissident beliefs. And, for those that don't remember, in San Andreas, you sort of meet Mike Torino, and he's basically a Fed. He's working for like the CIA, and he is sort of a caricature of why you shouldn't trust the Feds. And it's funny because back then, San Andreas was like before that was like 2007 or 8. And it's like, I think a lot of that stems from, because San Andreas is really set in the 90s, which overlaps with the stuff me and Oros talked about. The 90s, the crack epidemic, a lot of it's sort of like it's a modern civil rights era or a civil rights revival. with a lot of the LA stuff, the stuff that we talked about and me and Thomas talked about in the California stream. A lot of that stuff is relevant in the San Andreas storyline specifically. It's came out in 2007 or 8, something like that. It might have been earlier, but the fact that you have the 90s still in people's psyche with that game that overlaps with a lot of the stuff we talk about on the show. The 90s might be an arbitrary decade for some people. I think that's where a lot of modernity as we know it today in the 21st century, I think a lot of its roots are in the 90s. And we could look at extreme examples like the Attitude Era or Jerry Springer being allowed, the FCC just totally allowing stuff that wouldn't be acceptable in the 80s, having the pop culture slip like that. I just think that's a very interesting topic, and you can dedicate a lot of episodes to stuff like that. So, but anyways, not so much academic, but the fact that you have Mike Torino and the, what is it, the Del Loco Syndicate from Vice City, I think they were in, and then they're also in San Andreas, I think. The fact that you have him sort of working behind the scenes, I think that's another cool dynamic that people probably don't think about. People should really replay video games. That's another thing I wanted to get out of this stream was, you know, some of the, I'm looking at the ones I have and just all the GTA games. I think people, I used to watch those cutscenes like they were movies. Like I remember the San Andreas introduction. Remember that like 20-minute intro before the first mission, before CJ's at the airport with Sweet on the phone. That whole setup, like when CJ's in Liberty City, everything that's going on in Grove Street. To me, I just thought that was so interesting. And I look at, you know, even the Black Ops storylines. I mean, you're literally playing an MK Ultra victim. I mean, just think about that. And a lot of the alternative history, that's kind of the Philip K. Dick sensibility, maybe. But yeah, just the video game stuff is so untapped, and I don't know why. I mean, maybe it's because there's not a lot of Zoomers making content in the academic agent sphere. And I think people like Paul Fahrenheit and Prude, that's sort of what we started yesterday. And I'd like that to be a consistent theme. I think Zoomers could offer a lot to a lot of topics that are talked about in dissident circles. So here, I want to catch up with you guys. I know that was a bit here. I know I kind of opened a can of worms. Yeah, bell curve. Yeah, that's a very good point. It said a lot of Gamergate said it was the modern gatekeeping and the censorship and the realignment, setting new standards for politics that are and aren't allowed. So yeah, before that you had a lot of flexibility. We talked about this yesterday. Fallout New Vegas, you know, a lot of the reactionary tendencies, a lot of the anti-democracy takes. That was back in 2010. Imagine that. Imagine if you guys started your political journey early. Imagine if you were more aware in 2010. Maybe you would look at things a lot differently from the stuff that went on after that, you know? A lot of the world events that happened post 2010. If you had, I mean, I know hindsight's 2020, but just imagine if you could. Because I think a lot of people here were probably still stuck on the libertarian phase or still reaping the rewards from the Ron Paul revolution. And just maybe they just didn't get the information yet. But I always like to, hypothetically, I like to run the hypotheticals and wonder just what if you knew everything too early? How would that influence your political journey? There's also that line in San Andreas with Mike Torino. He talks about, he's reading a book. I forgot what it was. I'll look that up. Hopefully I remember. Robert Fripp's greatest work was Brian Eno and on Bowie's Heroes. So Academic Agent knows all about that, right? Vingol says Andy Sneed. That's right. That's right. David has a pretty cool take. Gamergate was wild and how much unified force was applied all across the internet to suppress it. That is true. Even though people see the internet as decentralized, it did unite the right. It united. No, wait a minute. Wait a second. No, it united gamers and people who were non-political and people who were curious, reacted to all the headlines from Kotaku and Game Informer. I might have the Game Informer magazines somewhere in here. It created a coalition online that was centralized. And so, to bring it back to Razer Fist, the fact that you had metalheads and normie right-wingers united, that's kind of what Gamergate did to the gaming community. It showed that a lot of gamers could, the would-be skaters in the 90s, the Jackass viewers in the 2000s, those are the people that would be reacting to Gamergate. So, yeah, it was a centralizing force, ironically, since it eventually led to us being skeptical of democracy. But yeah. Anyways. Lance Meyer says industrial rock could be revisited. I don't know. I just want what's that guy that does all the David Fincher soundtracks? What's that guy's name? Oh man, I'm blanking on it. Everyone knows who he is from Nine Inch Nails. I just wish the Nine Inch Nails influence would go away. That's another thing. It's over. It's done. We don't have to explore that anymore. That's the downside of industrial rock. It latches on to Trent Reznor. That's what it was. Yeah, we need to get away from the Reznor influence. Matt G said, the Lidden said in the early 90s that bass, drum, guitar had done all possible permutations, maybe, at least for a time. Yeah, that's true. I mean, after alternative, what can you do? You've done the fast, the heavy, galloping, the moody 90s stuff. And then what? Is there, there's not more, speed is only, maximizing and minimizing. There's no new speedometer, you know what I mean? So I just think people look at music very spiritually because of how it affects them. But there is a material side of it, Can only go so far. The censorship unites. Yeah, that's the thing. That's the ironic thing. That's why they shouldn't do it, for their own sake. Yo, Richard Crook knows the lore. Yeah. Yeah, man, that's an obscure one. Thomas might know about that too. David says they even brought that dumb Gamergate bimbo to the UN to talk about it. I forgot about that. I mean, if that doesn't emphasize the power of Gamergate, People who want to minimize it and say, oh, this is just something that happened on the internet. This is trolls. This happened in the gaming community. But people who say Twitter is not real life, which is not true. Twitter is probably more real than a lot of the stuff we encounter in the real world. But yeah, I mean, at the UN. Neat show. Yeah, there you go. Tumblr, yeah. I miss the Tumblr craze. I think I knew people in high school who were into it. But yeah, that was, again, just like me checking out content creators who used to be on YouTube. I like to go back and check out their early stuff before they got banned. There's that one, find their archived tweets, stuff that I missed. Like Sam Hyde was somebody that I got into like a year ago. And I wish I was watching Adult Swim when those episodes were live, stuff like that. Those hypotheticals. That's what I meant earlier. That may have been a little rambly, but imagine if you had all that knowledge back in like 2010 because you played Fallout New Vegas. You know what I mean? It would just change your perspective, and you would see content in areas where you wouldn't. So. Someone said something else. Maybe Gamergate is our enlightenment. Who would be well, I guess Sargon would be John Locke. Help me out, guys. Help me out. Remember when we did the Mulholland Drive, Miley Cyrus analogy? This is it, all right. This is it. Gamergate as the Enlightenment. We already got Sargon. I've already helped you guys out with John Locke, so where else can we go with that? Who would be who would be like the Rousseau radicals? Pushing the Overton window like they did in the Enlightenment. Looking at liberty, reinterpreting liberty. Yeah. Isaiah Berlin should have, man, if only he could have lived to see some of the new fault lines in right-wing politics. We really are the counter-enlightenment. We are De Maistra. Oh, man. Anyways, I'll catch up if you guys are having some input. Yeah, I respect pretty much all Zoomers that are in the dissident right, all of them. Can't think of anyone that are cringe offhand. So yeah, that's my answer. Any shills that are going after Zoomers, don't play into their hands. Support your Zoomers, all right? Got to stop with the infighting. Adam said, I noticed family members and schoolmates who got into Tumblr early were social outcasts, but now would be perfectly mainstream if they grew up to today. Their impact cannot be understated, in my opinion. So true, so true. Okay, Kevin Kidd with the lore, saving the stream here. His tournament name was Razer Fist because he plays Vega in Street Fighter. There it is, there it is. Barrel Roller says it's for his split personality. Yes, that is the Jekyll and Hyde sensibility. Gotta stop saying that word. I'm using it as a crutch. Sorry about that, guys. Don't want to be stale on the stream. Adam says Razor Fist is basically YouTube conservative Tucker Carlson. Yeah, that's true, and there's a role for that. Like I mentioned earlier, Doyle. John Doyle serves a good purpose, and even if I have said some disparaging things about populism and its limitations, I do think people that are like, I know some people on Instagram. I'm in this group chat there. People are kind of stuck in the populism circle and they need to get into the reactionary one. So Doyle is a good gateway for people like that. And a lot of people, people are in their journey, they're at different stages and they go at their own pace. So we have to keep that in mind. I would never counter signal a normie if they weren't acting in bad faith. You know what I mean? We gotta allow people to figure stuff out. Man, Richard Crook with the metal lore. Very cool. Yo, record deepness. I always remember the Big Heat from that Stan Ridgway album of the same name. Oh, really? Interesting. Oh, okay. Excuse me. I have to make a correction. I made a mistake. OAA says to be sympathetic to Razor Fist, he does less metal / noir videos because they get nuked by the copyright box. Well, that is a good reason. But you don't have to play the clips in the videos. So, like, that shouldn't hang up the content. You know what I mean? I think if you ask the audience, would you be willing to sacrifice some of the clips? Because people can look up on YouTube the songs. All we really need is the information, and people can use their Kantian autonomy to find out the rest. But I just did a paper on Kant, so I'm a little sorry about that. But they, I don't think that should prevent someone from doing their series because it is worthwhile. You can't use the political stuff as a crutch. Yeah, we love Doyle. We love Doyle. Yeah, Richard Cook brought up the other thing about the 90s is this is a negative aspect of the experimentation in the 90s. When you include some of that curiosity in a metal, you get a hodgepodge of a lot of subgenres that probably shouldn't exist. So yes, it's the beginning of the decentralized music, and people are using their imagination to pave new inroads for metal. But I would argue a lot of that stuff didn't live up to the test of time. I mean, just look at Limp Bizkit. Yeah, look at new metal in general. I mean, it's a funny meme. I'm not humorless when people bring up Fred Durst, but I think that's another aspect of the 90s that people should be aware of. The fact that more people were making music. Eddie Trunk talks about this, even though he's very much a boomer when he's talking about metal. The limitations of his psyche are on full display when you watch that metal show. But he gave a good take about how the fact that everyone can make music is a bad thing because, as we know with democracy, the majority of the population is not skilled in a lot of departments, but more specifically that one too. And if you've spent any time on SoundCloud, you're more than aware of that. If you have any memories from high school, you're more than aware of that. Oh, Kevin Kidd, if you're still in here, or if anybody has the answer to this, he says, I'm remembering that Sargon versus Academic Agent and Charlie stream now. Very cringe. I'm not totally glued into the relationship between Sargon and AA. I saw they did a stream together talking about classical liberalism, because I know Sargon did an Enlightenment video, which was, I think that was Skeptical Waves, who gave a pretty good take, saying this rambling cannot happen again. This was a disaster. And I thought that was very funny because, again, it's just one of those things where Sargon talking about the Dark Enlightenment is very ironic because a lot of the people that used to be part of his audience, they've graduated from Sargon to the Dark Enlightenment. So, you know, maybe he's got a little bit of a conflict of interest talking about that subject. It's directly competing against his brand. So that's a very interesting dynamic. The fact that he wants to, there's a good analogy for that. It's sort of, wow, that's like a serious example. I was going to say when Eddie Van Halen met the guy who created the amps, but no. What's a better analogy? It's like it's kind of like a My Fellow Kids moment. So it is interesting. EVKL is better than Isaiah Berlin. Is he? I'm more sympathetic to Isaiah Berlin, but again, I can't make a judgment call yet. So I appreciate you putting that in my mind. Hey, try and keep up here. Oh my bad. sorry. I was well, here, let me just throw in another topic to keep everybody interested here. The other thing that I was very interested in is the fact that AA contributed to the Quillette, which, you know, to me, the Quillette is the epitome of controlled opposition. Bill Kristol is somebody who I see as sort of the archetype of the boomer who refuses to grow up. Peter Pan, it's sort of the opposite of Peter Pan syndrome. It's a boomer that wants to stay old. That's what Bill Kristol is, the Weekly Standard. I was really surprised that the Bulwark was created in 2018. I thought that was an old rag. Maybe I'm thinking of something else, but anyways, I saw that Academic Agent did a video on Claire Lehman, which is very ironic and a fitting last name. I didn't even think of that, but yeah, her last name is Lehman, basically. And I wanted to read this article because there's some characters that you guys are probably familiar with, Pedro Gonzalez. But I went to click on this and like I need to be a subscriber, and I'm not going to give Claire any money. So that's sort of, so this whole outlet kind of outlived its usefulness once I realized that I needed to pay for this thing. But anyways, that's sort of Academic Agent talked about how Claire burned her bridge with people like Brett Weinstein and Tim Pool. And I see Razer Fist as potentially getting to that point if he doesn't start making friends with the dissident right. And I don't know what he's doing behind the scenes, but that's another good reason to bring up critique, not just from a selfish perspective of I want content, but I think if Razorfist chooses the wrong side with sympathizing with people like Chris Barnes and just some of these unserious people, you don't want to overlap with Jack Murphy. That's all I'll say. You really don't want to be on that side of the fault line. And I want, because he reads Buchanan, he's already halfway there. You would want Razorfist, if given the choice between someone like Academic Agent and Sargon, you don't want him to choose. I mean, not that it's a dichotomy too. That's the other thing. Again, I'm not trying to I'm not trying to poke the bear. I'm just saying that, you know, there's more to politics than just quoting Ayn Rand. So, and I'm not saying that he needs to read books either. That's not even the half of it. It's just you should have some intuition. You know, if you're watching these YouTube videos, like John Doyle serves a purpose to the Instagram community. These videos are easily digestible for someone like Razorfist, and I think he could have a much cooler audience. I don't know what it's like in the Razorfist Discord, but I imagine there's a lot of usual suspects. I was in Radlib's Discord, and I was curious to find that they were very receptive to his recent video, this one, about the gas prices. And because there's that overlap with Radlib, and well, that's the thing about Razorfist. He's just lib. He's not a radical. So that's the other thing. It's very very one-dimensional. I was gonna look at this live because I don't know if I've ever been here before. Is this just a placeholder for timeless IDs? No, is this a placeholder for his? This is kind of cool. Well, some of it, not that. Interesting. I didn't know. You know, people who make websites, it's a little redundant because all they do is use it as a Dropbox for their videos. Like, why? Like, you would never bookmark the Rageaholic website, would you? Editorials. Oh, this is kind of interesting. There might be some content in here. We'll save it for later, but yeah, if you follow Razorfist on Twitter, you're gonna get a lot of this. You're gonna get a lot of shadow. Maybe we need to compare Steelstorm with his book, Something Moonlight. That might be interesting. There might be a lot of dangerous similarities with Thomas and Razorfist. Isn't that kind of funny? Think about it. Think about the overlap. I'll have to bring that up with him tomorrow. Something to keep in mind. Maybe this is the coalition. We're building it right here. I also wanted to find. I was thinking about finding some other content that I might save. Here, let me. Oh man, I'm like way behind. What time tomorrow is Thomas? I'm not sure, to tell you the truth. We shall see. Here, let me start at the bottom. I made that was my mistake. Thomas Star Trek DS9 commentary would be fun, interesting. I'm curious if he's a Trekkie. I kind of don't get that impression. Well, I guess the science, the sci-fi interest, maybe it's there. Oh, here we go. D asks, you ever not listen to a song / band because of your faith? Yeah. And I'd like to talk to Tyler Hamilton about that because, well, with something like I think Tom Araya is very hypocritical because he claims that when he, well, they say there's a contradiction because the type of metal that he plays is very antagonizing towards Christianity, and he said, well, he's a Catholic, and but it's like there isn't an ironic way. There isn't really an ironic way of blaspheming. You know what I mean? You're still blaspheming. So I think you can only go so far saying that. And I don't even know if you could say it at all, to be honest. Tom Araya, I don't think he's being a very good Catholic saying the stuff that he says in his music. So you know what I mean? I don't know. That seems like there's probably something wrong with that. You know what I mean? I don't think that's just being picky. I think there's something there. Danielle, I would not do that. So that's my that's my answer. Martin Webb. Hey, Martin Webb, why do you have a check mark? What does that mean again? Oh, you just oh yo OAA sending me the Quillette articles, and Martin Webb did so too. So thank you. Is this it? Interesting. How long ago? Oh, 2018. So like even for me, that was like the beginning of me starting to wonder some stuff. Oh, this is kind of interesting. I'll have to read this stuff. Do I have to subscribe? Please. Okay, I don't. Oh, dude, this is awesome. Thank you, man. Thank you. I like checking out this stuff. I know for some people it's probably lame, but I mean, it's like a Scott Greer diet. You know what I mean? You want to. There's a lot here. Thank you, man. No, I'll save that. What else we got? You guys got anything? Bell curve. Bell curve. Giving credit where it's due. Limp Bizkit's Break Stuff was 1999. By 2003, we were in the Iraq War. I always found that spooky. So true. Very coincidental. Stupendous. Ah, that's pretty cool. Stupendous says Deftones are legit. Thomas is getting me interested in Deftones, so I'll have to check that out. There's this one group I know. It feels like Deftones is very receptive to women, so I'm probably gonna pick up on that. Someone sent me her playlist, and it was very like girly, and I'm afraid that if I check out Deftones, I'm gonna have a similar reaction. So I'll be neutral for now. And Thomas, of course, has given them a shout out. So I'll keep an open mind on the Deftones recommendation. Oh, bass guitarist. I think it was VH1 Classic. I think you're right. Oh, here we go. Here's some content. D ask, what was the last good Ozzy album? Define good any way you please. All right. You mean good in like the Kantian deontology? Is that what you mean? Or good in the sense of like utilitarian, like if it satisfies the maximizes the happiness of the most people, then that makes an album successful, you know. I remember Eddie Van Halen said, if we release an album and it makes one person happy, that's mission accomplished. Which I'm curious what you guys think about that take. I don't think that that's a good standard, although it does kind of placate into the anti-democracy. So maybe there's something to that. Maybe there's some overlap. But anyways, I did not like the last Ozzy album. He had the guitar player from Post Malone. I forget that guy's name, but he's got a bunch of pop credits. And I just thought it was a boring album, to tell you the truth. I forgot what it was called, too. Last good Ozzy album? Like, consistently? Probably Osmosis. I'm not totally anti Zach Wilde. Zach Wilde posts a lot of Christian content on his Twitter, which is kind of interesting. And I think Rob Halford may do something similar. He's sort of, maybe he's trying to get out of his past, which is pretty cool, if that's true. So I'd probably say Osmosis as far as overall. Although, because like stuff like Scream is like, that's the epitome of modern metal. That's just in lockstep with everything else. Like, what's that? Oh man, I was listening on the radio the other day, and they keep shilling this one band. Forget what it was, but anyways, for those of you that know, like the modern metal stuff it's so uniform, and they may as well all have the same producer because it's the same sound. So there's not even any imagination that goes into it. The chat is very distracting right now. Zach Wilde listening to Skeptical Waves while on tour with Ozzy. Yeah, one can hope. Agree with Osmosis. Not a big fan of No More Tears. Aw, dude, why not? What's wrong with No More Tears? That's got Mr. Tinker Train. Very cool, underrated opener. Title track's awesome too. I mean, it's like it is getting away from like the Jakey Lee era more so. It's not totally modern though. Maybe it's got some of the 90s influence, but to me that's like a perfect middle ground. You know what I mean? It's not totally surrendering. Okay. Vingul, that's a very broad question. You're like combining a bunch of genres that are, from my perspective, distinct. So that's like saying, what's your favorite jazz, blues, R&B? It's I'll just say I don't really listen to extreme metal. It just, to me, it's very boring, to tell you the truth. I'm more sympathetic to thrash. Yeah, no problem. You're good, man. You're good. Oh, I forgot to answer the other because I was making that stupid philosophy joke. Good is just no filler. Or, the thing about filler, my metric system for albums is we can afford some filler, but we can't use it as a crutch. And in the 80s, that standard was like the ballad. Every album had a ballad. And so that just came with the territory. You wouldn't give something a low rating just for the ballad unless you were like Lester Bangs or someone like that. So to me, majority if the majority of the songs are not modernized, that's a good album. And of course, you're gonna have some distinctions. You're gonna have the fast songs at the beginning, and then maybe it gets a little more mellowed throughout the middle and end. But like Van Halen 2 is very similar to Van Halen 1. It's got all the beats, but like there's a wide range. Like Beautiful Girls is not on the same tier as Somebody Get Me a Doctor. So you have to allow, even if Beautiful Girls isn't a song that I it's not my go-to song, I still see a lot of value in the fact, I mean, that riff is awesome. But like if the album is going to get moody, I'm not going to dock points for that. You know what I mean? And to me, albums post Osmosis, they're just appeasing the modern metal audiences. They're appeasing the Woodstock 99 fans. And they're not really like with Jakey Lee. I mean, Jakey Lee has a background in blues. And of course, he's a metal musician, but he just, you can tell there's a lot of, he's exploring a lot of things when he's playing on Bark at the Moon. So you have songs like Spiders, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of depth with Bark at the Moon compared to, you know, Scream, which is like as Thomas said, it's like a pep rally. That's what modern metal is. It's appeasing the lowest common denominator. So that's my metric. I don't mind, even if honestly, maybe this is me being biased, but even if the ballad isn't good at all, I'm not even going to dock it points for that. Because, I mean, you just have to put it in context. And the 80s decade, to me, the pressure in the 80s is different than the pressure now. You could say, well, metal bands modernizing their music is appeasing the record companies the same way that putting a ballad on the album is appeasing the suggestions from the manager. But I don't think that's the same, because the 80s albums had a lot less filler and they were a lot less uniform and there was a lot more imagination. You had a bluesy song like what's that? Like Steelheart is a good example of a band that on the surface, it's your run of the mill glam band that was trying to capitalize on it when it was going away, like we were talking about with the early 90s. But like there is a lot of bluesy stuff in there. There's some hard rock, there's some AOR, like what we mentioned earlier, TNT. So to me, that's not a band just capitalizing on the glam popularity. Those guys are musicians. And not to sound like a boomer, but a lot of this stuff today is just boring. So there you go. There's your $5 there's your $5 answer rather. What else? I was trying to remember the questions you guys were asking last stream that we didn't get to. Charlemagne was asking well, I guess it was a question for me and Thomas, so I guess we'll save that one. Yo, DS, have you heard the band Gillan with Ian Gillan from Deep Purple? Of course, I love Glory Road. Glory Road is the album that I clung to in high school. I haven't listened to Mr. Universe, although let's do that right now. You guys got to check this out. This is like, and I think Sea of Tranquility talked about this too. Look at this album cover. See, when we're talking about cliches in the 80s, oh, everything has to be a ballad. It's like, okay, you're right. Fair enough. But look at this, man. How can I hate on this? This is the album cover for, I think, his debut album. His debut, Getting Away from Deep Purple. What does Ian Gillan have to own? This is this is the first impression, Mr. Universe. So I actually haven't listened to this album in its entirety. I probably will now that it's now that you've mentioned it. But stuff like this, the charm to it, I can't counter signal this. So yes, Gillen is cool. Cool band. And I think shares probably a lot of the non-Deep Purple stuff that Gillen was interested in. So yeah, no, Gillen's pretty cool. Hard rock band. I think some people put him in the new wave of British heavy metal. I don't know if they technically qualify, but I think the timeline overlaps. So interesting stuff. Thank you for bringing that up. So Vingel, yeah, not a fan of extreme metal. Yo, what's up, Oscar Toe? What's that awesome Winger ballad? Well, which one are you talking about? Another broad question. Bring Sea of Tranquility on for a live stream or go on his channel. Jokes aside, the guy's a legend. Yeah, you know. See, that's the example of a positive boomer. Those are the boomers we want to conserve. We want to get away from Eddie Trunk. A lot of that stuff I think is stale, but Sea of Tranquility can stay. P. Pardo, we welcome him on the channel. I did not drink milk today, Danielle. Let me see what else. I don't know. Should we call it? We've been going for a while, so. Can anyone feel bad listening to a John Lord solo? I can't imagine it. Cannot imagine it. Yo, Auto VCR. I think I recognize your name. Thank you for stopping by. Thank you for stopping by at the Double R Diner for an afternoon stream. So, anyways, I don't know. What do you guys think? We covered pretty much all the topics. I don't know if I forgot any. I thought this was a pretty good tweet. Maybe we can get Thomas's reaction to it. Thought this was pretty good. And maybe we can get a poll here. Do you guys agree that we should do this? Because it's probably fitting. Although, I don't know if the A at the end is necessary. That might just be a personal preference. But it is an interesting question to ask, for sure. So, while we're here, of course, you guys probably know Prude. The guy is an absolute king. And the reason why we had delays yesterday. Oh, nice. Yo, Ben-Hur. Cool. Was because if you guys are interested in continuing and checking out some of our video game center topics, I know on Thomas's second episode of his Substack podcast, we got into a little bit of video games. And so this one is dedicated to Fallout New Vegas and the politics of it, some of the ideas. And so if you guys are interested in that, this is free. This is free on Prude's Substack. So I want to plug his stuff. Not that he needs it from me. but the guide just is nothing but a good time. So got to, in case anyone was wondering about yesterday, this might be something that you guys are interested in. So, all right. Are we winding down? Are we winding down? What do you guys think? Poll in the chat. What do you got? What do you got? You're winding up. Great to hear. Great to hear. Yeah, I'm running out of content, guys. Remember, you are the music and I'm just the band. Me and Thomas are just here as a vehicle to give you guys what you want. So I think we've peaked. I think we've covered a lot of ground. So, but yeah, I want to thank you guys again for reaching 1,000 subscribers. I am thankful. I am appreciative of you guys tuning in. You guys make it possible. I love talking to you guys. You know, I want to do what I can to make content because, you know, this is a glorified hobby. So I want to thank you guys for giving us the opportunity to stay on here. We're monetized. So if we have any donors, if we have any Peter Thiel's in chat, then we are always grateful. So just wanted to let you guys know you guys are awesome. Is that a cat behind you? What are you talking about? A cat? Talking about the statues? I don't know, man. I don't know what you're talking about. All right. Bell Curve, thank you for stopping by. Vingol, Rare Bit. D with the questions, thank you. What is it? Oh. Sorry. I'm just catching up with the chat. No problem. You're not? Oh, gotcha. Okay. Alrighty. I think I've overstayed my welcome. Letting me into your guys' house. I've been a little rude. I'm the uncle who won't leave. So I will leave you guys there. Tomorrow we'll be back, I think, with Thomas. And so expect that. Stay tuned just in case. Maybe save some questions because it'll be both of us and not just me. Always enjoyable. Thank you, Vingol. Thank you, Danielle, for stopping by. Putting up with our political nonsense. Behind you to the right? Well, is that my right or your right? That doesn't really help. It's back? What are you talking about? Anyways, getting a little distracted here. But thank you guys for stopping by. I appreciate it. Your right, so my right. You think there's something right here? There's not. My charger's down there. Schizo stream. Yeah, dude. You're making me go crazy, Danielle. What's going on? Are you gaslighting me? Anyways, distractions aside, thank you guys for stopping by. This might have been a little rambly. We'll try and be a little more organized next time. Try and be a little more centralized, like the power that we read about. So thank you guys for stopping by. Thank you guys for reaching us to our subscriber goal. Thank you guys for commenting, asking questions. I always appreciate it. You guys make the show worthwhile, as always. So, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Brotherhood of Nod, too. Yeah, thank you, all you guys. Record Deepness, that's another one. D, Oscar Toe, Bell Curve, Richard. I want to thank all you guys. Kevin Kidd, Martin Webb, David, of course, a regular. Bass guitarist, as always. Chris B. OAA. Anyways, thank you guys. Everyone I forgot. I'm sorry about that, but you guys, we will be back. And so thank you for stopping by. I feel like I've said that a bunch of times. Thank you again. And I'll see you guys next time. Have a good rest of your evening.